I'm really honored to welcome one of the greatest value creators in the last decade for all of your portfolios. As you know, for a long time, India was in the shadows of China. Everybody said, well, yeah, we are bullish on India, but China is where we are investing. So I would love to welcome our honored guest, Binny Bansal, the founder of Flipkart, which had, is one of the biggest exits in your portfolio, and also Binny put India on the map. So welcome, Binny.
Thanks, Alex.
So, Binny, it's been an amazing journey. So I have to tell you the story. I first heard about Binny. I was involved with Excel India when they were just two people. They had a $10 million fund, and I went to my clients and I said, we need to invest with Excel India. That time they were called Erasmic. And so it was such a great journey, and it was almost unthinkable. They were raising a $50 million fund, and the largest exit in India hadn't even been $1 billion, right? Make My Trip hadn't happened. So they were projecting, their returns were projected on a $1 billion exit, right? And so from that fund, they got a $20+ billion exit. So that's the thing. So Binny, please tell us your story and how you got connected with our friends Shubrata and your journey as an entrepreneur. I know there's we look at the thing, but I'm sure there must have been ups and downs.
Yeah. So we started. Sachin and I both started Flipkart in 2007. From Bangalore. And if you think about India in 2007, it was very different from US in 2007. So there were very few people on the internet, maybe 20, 25 million people. All of it was obviously people on laptops or desktops. There was no mobile internet at that time. So it was almost probably like early 2000s in the US, or even before that kind of ecosystem. And there was almost absolutely no VC ecosystem. They were like maybe 3 or 4 VCs. Axel was like called Erasmic and was like a $10 million fund, very, very, very small. So we basically started with like $8,000 to $10,000 that we had saved, working a couple of years in software developers. And for the first 2 years, we just bootstrapped the company. Those first 2 years were the only time when we were so we were growing crazy through all the years. Those first 2 years were the only time we were a profitable company.
Wow.
So because after we raised money, we stopped being profitable. And so it's a funny story how I met Subrata and Prashant. So I think the one thing they've done really well over the years is really build a very strong team. And that's how we got to know them. So they had hired this guy called Abhishek Goyal. And Abhishek was deep into sort of looking at what is happening in the startup ecosystem, and he reached out to us.
Oh, wow.
And this was before he was in Axel, and he started helping us a little bit. Then he joined Axel or Erasmic, and he took us to Subrata Prashant. Subrata, at that time, the theory in the Indian ecosystem was e-commerce takes too much capital because everybody had seen Amazon plowing through so much capital, so everybody said, okay, maybe we'll not invest. But somehow, I think after maybe 6 odd months of conversation and growth, I guess these guys got convinced and pulled the trigger. So that worked out pretty well for us.
Great. So what's next with Flipkart, you've achieved so much. What's next for the Indian startup ecosystem? And I know with your current success, are founders now coming to you, and what type of problems are they having, and where can you have the most impact?
Yeah, so if I look back, actually, I was talking to somebody yesterday. The thing I'm most actually proud of over the last 10, 11 years is really that when I see the ecosystem where it is and the distance it has traveled. 2007, a few startups, very few VCs, and from there to like today, there are thousands and thousands of great startups, and very decent VC ecosystem out there, and just so many problems to solve. And a lot of the ecosystem is now full of ex-Flipkart people, because either they're founders or they're in the leadership teams of these companies. So it's, I mean, that's the most heartening thing for me to see. So there's a lot happening in across areas. So India doesn't have too many brands across most categories, right? So there are a lot of startups just building consumer brands. And there's a lot happening there, and that's interesting because a brand has some unique modes which you can create around a brand, and that's an interesting area. Another interesting area is enterprise software is emerging very early.
We've seen Freshdesk and Browser Stack.
So there are already a few companies which are breaking out, and there are so many just getting started.
And all these are global companies,
and, So and what they're doing is really using India as a test bed as to get to product market fit, and then I think the idea is to just go sell outside. But India again becomes, they can really get to product market fit fast because they can hire talent cheaply, and they can test out the product faster. And I think once the product works, it's become easier to sell globally than it was 10 years back. Like 10 years back, if a company wanted to go, enterprise company wanted to go from India globally and sell, I would have said, no, it's not going to work. Today, my push to companies is, okay, you've found product market fit, stop selling here, go sell outside. So enterprise software, I think, is very interesting. On the consumer side, the brands, healthcare.
Healthcare, yeah.
A lot is happening on healthcare. I think a lot can happen in education as well. There's some companies starting to emerge, but I think the next 10 years, I see that's again another area. We have so many people to provide education for, and just we will need much more scalable and cost-effective models to provide quality education, and technology is probably the answer. So I see a lot of it happening in the education domain as well. And then obviously, I mean, there's all the core areas like e-commerce, commerce, logistics, all that is growing as well as the economy keeps growing.
And then one thing India is not associated with is deep tech. And I know we are co-investors in a couple of deep tech companies, Sigtuple and Grey Orange. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, I think that's also starting to emerge.
Yeah.
Because now entrepreneurs are confident that again they can start something in deep tech and get at least some talent going and build companies. But I think there the bottleneck becomes the talent becomes a bottleneck sooner or later. But the good thing is again they are able to get to product market fit, and then again move maybe to the US or somewhere along with the talent. And they have to move their talent as well. So most of these like enterprise SaaS companies don't need to move talent. These companies need to move the talent pool as well. Like they need to set up their technology teams here after they have 15, 20, 30 people.
Yeah, they don't have that. And that's I think where, like you alluded to, Flipkart did not just help the confidence of LPs in India, but it also created or help accelerate the entrepreneurial ecosystem. One of the things that we've seen in Europe, in Silicon Valley especially, is that you have so many people who have gone through scaling or even blitz scaling. And now, until Europe had that, companies like Skype and others, until they had those alumni, they could not scale. And I think, is that the bottleneck that you are seeing in India as well? And I think that's why the Flipkart and Ola alumni, as well as kind of your expertise is so important.
Oh yeah, so I mean that's how things start, right? There has to be a seed, and if you look at even the Silicon Valley, there was Fairchild Semiconductor, which was a seed, and then here we have Silicon Valley. So I think that's how ecosystems start. So And I think the Indian ecosystem is definitely, I mean, is on the right path. And just, I see a lot happening. In next 10 years, I think the economy hopefully does well.
Yeah.
And
yeah, well, India has so many things going for it, right?
Going for it,
750 million smartphone users, the cheapest internet, mobile first.
Yeah. So I think a lot of a lot of internet consumers. So I think it's all the inputs are stacking up in the right direction. Yeah.
And they've built a great infrastructure for FinTech as well.
Yeah, we've been quite big beneficiaries of that. So we, so at Flipkart in 2016, we acquired a company called PhonePe, which was like almost a pre-product company, and they were building a new payments product based on a new platform created by the government, Indian government, a new infrastructure created by the Indian government, and today they do about, I think, a run rate of like $80 billion annually sort of flow through, run rate flows through them today within 3 years. And we have more than, I think, 30, 40 million monthly active customers, not users, customers, like people doing transactions. So I think just the, in India, the advantage also is we don't have antiquated infrastructure. So you can just create new infrastructure. So this payment rails was created from scratch by the government within a couple of years. In the US, it won't be, I mean, it's difficult to do because there's just so much infrastructure already there, and it's hard to change things. In India, you can just build new things.
Yeah, and sometimes those new things leapfrog, and I think that's what I think most people don't realize. It's great we have, Visa. Visa was started in 1958.
So we don't have, like, nobody uses, in India, maybe 10, 15 million people use credit cards.
Yeah.
And so everybody else is on mobile payments.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. So, and I think that's one of the things, like, I know we were talking, so if we project outwards, it's not just that, maybe there will be, 100 companies. I know we will probably, this bull market will, run its course, and we'll probably go through a recessionary period, but over the long term, I think there will probably be in the next 10 years, maybe 100 unicorns, right?
Oh yeah, I think we're already I firmly
20.
believe that.
Yeah,
easily.
we're already around 18, 20. Yeah.
I think 100 will be probably
underestimating.
Yeah.
And
because there's just so much to be done.
So much to be done. And larger and larger. It's also the kind of ambition. So when people have seen it, they've seen, well, Binny can do it, and so can I. So there are like more ambitions. You've set the
and entrepreneurs are just getting better because, I mean, they have more access to information, they have access to more mentors, they have access to people who've been there, done that. So I think they just know a lot better than they did like 10 years back. Like, we made a lot of mistakes. We had basically access to no mentors in India.
There was no
mentors. There was no ecosystem, no mentors. All the VCs were fairly new to the ecosystem as well. So nobody to help. So like, I've made all mistakes.
You've made all the mistakes in the world.
I'm making sure people make lesser.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's amazing. So what about access to capital? Are you seeing now there is more access to capital, institutional capital, or are there pockets where there is less?
Yeah, so I think access to capital is really good in the like pre-Series A, Series A kind of stage. So there, all the marquee funds are there: Axel, Sequoia, Matrix, Lightspeed. Like, there's just many funds doing seed, Series A. I think the Series B, C is probably a bit of a vacuum because that's mostly done by maybe Sequoia is doing a little bit of it, but then it's mostly capital coming from outside India. It's not an Indian fund. So either it's a Tiger, Naspers, it's people sitting outside India doing a lot of that. So I think and there are now a lot of companies who are going through that stage. So I think that's one clear area where probably there needs to be a vacuum. After that, obviously, there are bigger PE funds which will do your E and above. So I think that's okay. But I think the BC stage probably there's a vacuum, a bit of a vacuum there.
Yeah. I think also we're seeing this two-factor phenomena. One, India being the kind of launching ground for Middle East, for Southeast Asia, I think, and also the Indian diaspora. I mean, yes, last night we had the, honor Dheeraj, right? So there's the Indian diaspora everywhere now. So.
Yeah, I think it's amazing to see that.
Yeah. So do you see more and more companies having some ties to India as they expand in Southeast Asia and?
Yeah, I think the other thing which is happening for Indian companies, good you brought that up. Other thing happening for Indian companies is now Southeast Asia is emerging as a potential market.
Yeah.
Again, 5 years back there was very little internet there and very little digital infrastructure. I think now companies have started to think about, the market is ripe, so maybe I should also go and set up, try to do what I'm doing here in that market as well. So it almost is, and it's almost an equally big market as India today. There are fewer people, but GDP is probably a little higher. So I think that's another thing I'm seeing companies starting to push into Southeast Asia sooner than they were doing before.
Great. So, Binny, you've accomplished so much with Flipkart, and it's like, what's next for you? You're still, very young. You're still very driven. What's next for you?
I want to take some time to figure that out. Right now, currently, I'm basically just working on a theme of helping entrepreneurs. So and doing few activities around that. So I'm a big investor in like 3-4 companies, so I help the founders directly there. Then I've started another company called X210X Technologies with a couple of ex-Flipkart colleagues, and where I don't have a day-to-day role. I'm more like an executive chairman, but the whole idea of that company is to see how we can help growth companies. It's almost like one of the things we do is almost like a Y Combinator for growth stage companies. So we're starting with the first cohort of 8 companies in India in August.
Wow.
And we'll see how that goes.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's so refreshing. That's why we love working with entrepreneurs like yourself. It is only the entrepreneurs that will rethink venture capital, rethink delivering value. No VC would just write a check, right? Because they know they can't add value. And here you start by how do you deliver value, and the check comes later, right? It's just how do you deliver value, the scaling. And there must be a lot of need for that, and that's so innovative.
Yeah, especially for first-time entrepreneurs, right? I mean, a first-time entrepreneur is mostly learning on the job.
Yeah.
And there's when you're scaling a company, so there are different. A company goes through 2 phases, right? One is the first phase from idea to a product market fit, some momentum, and then there is the growth phase. Yeah. And when the company is going through the growth phase, there are multiple things you need to take care of while you're growing, and the founder is really learning on the fly. They will know they will know some things which are important for scaling. They will not know many things which are important for scaling. So the vision really is that if we can help the founders see a little bit ahead of the curve and avoid, instead of making 100 mistakes, make 80, make 50 mistakes. I think we've added enough value. So I think that's the vision there.
Yeah, and that's scaling. So where do you find this? The Indian, of course, they're very bright, very ambitious, very hardworking. Where do you find the areas? Is go-to-market a big area? Is hiring? Is culture? What are the things that you think?
I think, again, it depends on the founder, actually. Depends on the strength of the founder background. Yeah. So some founders are really thoughtful about culture, but might not be that be that thoughtful about how to grow. Some are great about growing, might not be very thoughtful about how to scale supply and quality of service, and all of those things. How to scale culture and just the team itself. Yeah. Like when you're going from 100 to 500 to 1,000 people in the growth stage. Yeah. I think that's a common problem across all of them. So I think we've been at it for the last 6 months, and where we are now is we have validated that the need is big enough.
And actually that need is global. I don't think there's anything that exists like that, right? They don't teach you that at business schools, right? So unless you've been at a company which was successful, you've been at a PayPal. I mean, that's why the PayPal mafia was so successful, because they saw the hyper growth and they learned from that.
So maybe we become the HBS of growth startups.
There you go. That's amazing. And you could definitely go global with that. Is that your aspiration to?
Yeah, I think. So especially, I think new emerging areas are very clear. Like Southeast Asia, again, we see the need very clearly. I'm not so sure how much of the need will be here in the US. I mean, we'll test it out and we'll see. Because again, the ecosystem is much more mature, developed. There's so many people who you can talk to. So we'll see.
But LATAM, we just had Nubank,
so all the emerging areas make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Maybe US is the last one.
Maybe US is, excellent. Well, I'd like to open it to to the floor and see if we have some questions from the thing. But I do want to do a short poll, if you don't mind. We have a lot of distinguished CIOs here and others. I want to, how many people are bullish about India? Because I know, and then we can probably do a follow-on thing. So let's see a show of hands. Awesome, awesome. Well, we're like, now I'm gonna do another thing. So good, not everyone, but maybe I would say 40%, something like that. How many people are more bullish on India over China? Okay, wow. Well, we have a smaller show of hands, but still some holdouts. Fantastic, fantastic. So please, go ahead. Okay, there's, go ahead, Dave.
Sorry. Hi, Binny. There's been a lot of talk, I guess, about China's involvement in building apps and investing in India, and also India sort of trying to take more control of its own investment ecosystem. Wonder what your thoughts are about, how investments from either U.S. or China versus internal investments from India are affecting strategy going forward. How do you build WeChat type of infrastructure, your own sort of iPhone type of infrastructure with homegrown solutions, or whether that's a concern or not?
I think there's more noise than really signal. So I think there's some noise around that, but I think on the ground India's a very open country from a capital standpoint. So I think whether it's capital from China or from the US, I think it's pretty open. And on the ground, I haven't seen like any hiccups or anything from a capital standpoint. There are interesting things people are trying to do around building the infrastructure. Some of them more successful, some less. So like the payments infrastructure is very successful, but stuff like maps or even chat and all that is still to be seen. Even I guess a bit more difficult to do. Payments is regulated, so you can just tell everybody this is how it works and that's it. I think chat is consumer, right? So you can't just tell consumers, oh, this is the only chat infrastructure and you got to use it. So I think that's in a country like India, that's difficult to manage. So I don't see that being very successful. At least that's my hunch.
Great. Next question there.
Binny, we have seen some exits happen from India through acquisitions and a few like Make My Trip, being listed in the US. What do you see about the possibility of Indian exits happening on the Indian stock market or other markets, IPO-wise?
Good question. I think the Indian stock market hasn't really seen something like that, right? So there has to be somebody who goes and does it like the first time. And I think once a benchmark is established, things might open up. So I think we're just probably waiting for somebody to really do it in the right way in India. I think the appetite my intuition is appetite will be very high. For example, there was this offline retailer which went public 3-4 years back called DMart, and they were trading at like almost 100x profit. which is almost like technology multiples, right? So the market is happy to give multiples to the right business models and companies, and wherever there's scarcity, and there's clearly scarcity for tech companies in the Indian market. So I'm bullish, but somebody needs to get it done. So we are probably waiting for the first one.
Thank you. Chang Nguyen from TI Platform Management. Binny, I think we spoke about this during the dinner, but we see that SoftBank been deploying a lot of capital across the globe. We saw SoftBank launch a fund in Latin America, and they have been deploying a lot of capital in India, for example.
Yeah.
We saw Oya got like 1 billion fund by SoftBank, right? And I think in the dinner we talk about if your companies get fund by SoftBank, maybe you should sell the portfolio. But at the same time, as an entrepreneur, getting a lot of capital from SoftBank can create a lot of chance and pressure in terms of growth, right? Because you are getting $1 billion at ridiculous valuation, like $6 billion and beyond, right? So what is your advice for entrepreneurs? Because many of these entrepreneurs, they will never go public, right? Because it's better for them to be private. They will have much better valuation. So what are your advice for the entrepreneur taking money from SoftBank?
I'll give you context of our own story. So at Flipkart, we went to the same thing, not from SoftBank, but we went to the same funding frenzy in 2014 and 15. And that was kind of a bubble time in India. So we raised $1 billion at 6 or 7 billion in mid of 14. Then we raised money at 11 billion within 6 months, and then at 15 in another 3-4 months. And all of this was obviously, the business wasn't growing as fast as the valuation was growing, and that really, put a lot of pressure on just everyone, because now you're valued at 15 billion. The business also needs to catch up, and sooner rather than later, and catch up to 15 and then go to 20, 25, and something which organically would have needed 4 or 5 years. There was pressure to do it in a couple of years, and it wasn't an easy time for the company, and we went through our ups and downs there. So my advice to, at least from my learning, my advice to entrepreneurs would be to really, valuation is not at a point game, right? You can raise today at X valuation, but it doesn't mean that's your valuation, because your valuation 3 years after that could be higher or lower. So valuation is a really long-term game. So I think when you're raising money, raising really at a fair valuation always makes sense, because that just makes sense for the entrepreneur and for the person, for the partner coming in as well, and creates the right incentives for top down, from the board to people on the ground, to do things. Otherwise, I think the incentives can get lopsided if you raise at too high a valuation. So I think I know it's hard to do when you're, somebody's giving you money at 2x, 3x, 50% more, 100% more than what your fair value is. But I think the negative effects are real, and people have gone through, multiple people have gone through them. So I would caution against that.
Awesome. Well, I'd like to thank everyone, and thank you so much,
Thanks,
Binny.
Alex.
It was such a privilege having you. Thank you. Thank you again.